Hello, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to day 2 of this VITA training for new volunteers. I am glad to see you back. Hope all is well and that you are staying warm in this cold weather.
Yes.
100, was there something that you needed to do before we got started?
No, I just asked that everyone type their name into the chat just so I can take attendance that way. But other than that, I think we're good to go. Just thank you all for being here. Thank you for walking us through this.
All righty.
I just want to say I seen everybody doing it, but I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't write my name down last night, so but anyway, I was here though.
All right. So if you're not talking, please put yourselves on mute. If you have a question, you can always come off mute. You can interrupt me if I'm going too fast, ask me to slow down if I'm not going fast enough. If at any point you all need a break, you are more than welcome to tell me that as well. If not, I won't pay attention to the time and I'll just keep on talking. So if at any point that you all need to stop me, you can do that and just let me know. All right. Any questions or concerns before we get started? All right. On last evening, we talked about your responsibilities as a VITA TCE program volunteer, and that we just went into that you have a responsibility to provide quality service and to uphold the ethical standards of the program. When you begin as a volunteer, you will be asked to sign the volunteer standards of conduct, which states that you will adhere to the standards of the VITA TCE program, such as following the quality site requirements that we went over. There are 10 of those. Do not accept payment, ask for donations, or accept refunds. Don't solicit business. Do not knowingly prepare false returns. Engage in criminal, infamous conduct, and treat all taxpayers in a professional, courteous, and respectful manner. On last evening, we also talked about due diligence and you being and providing due diligence in your role, just ensuring that you are confirming the taxpayer's identity, providing them top quality service by helping them understand and meet their tax responsibilities, and clarifying information that may appear to be inconsistent or incomplete. And so if there are any questions about anything that we covered on last night, let me know. I'll do my best to get it answered or find the answer for you. We went through the volunteer standards of conduct as the questions and answers as it relates to the certification. On last night, we also started the intake, interview, and quality review training. And so that's what we're going to complete on today. And then we'll go over the questions and answers as it relates to that certification. And then we'll move on to important changes, scope of service, temporary provisions, and go through everything that we have enough time to get through on tonight. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So on last evening, we started in publication 5101, which is the intake, interview, and quality review process, certification, training. And so we're going to pick up back while we stopped off on last night. If there are any questions or concerns, again, stop me, ask. I think Hunter may be manning the chat box. You can always put it in the chat so that I can get to your questions. Again, if you're not asking a question, please put yourselves on mute. All right. We left off on the quality review process that said every site must ensure that a complete quality review process is performed on every return prepared. This is to confirm that tax law was applied correctly and the computed tax return is free from error based on the taxpayer intake, interview, completed form 13614C, supporting documents, and tax return preparer notes. The quality review takes place after the return is prepared, but before the taxpayer signs the return. We don't ever want the taxpayer to sign a return agreeing to what is on that return if they have not went through the quality review process with a quality reviewer. Quality reviewers must have in-depth knowledge of tax law, effective communication skills, and tact and explaining information to taxpayers and volunteers. The quality review process includes the following: the quality review methods, components of a thorough quality review, concluding the quality review process. SPEC recommends using the TaxSlayer quality review print set when you're going over that information with the taxpayer. However, again, I'm going to always refer you to your site coordinator and assistant site coordinator to what that print set will look like. All returns must be quality reviewed by another volunteer other than the person that prepared it. Self-review is never an option when it comes to quality review and that return. The volunteer must be certified to the level required for that tax return. So if that return required an advanced certification preparer, then a basic someone certified to the basic level cannot quality review that return. So again, your site coordinator should have a process in place to determine who qualifies what. The quality review method that a site uses depends on the size of the site, the number of experienced volunteers available, and the certification level of the volunteers at the site. There are only two acceptable methods for quality reviewing a tax return. That's designated reviewer. In this process, an IRS tax law certified volunteer is solely dedicated to reviewing returns prepared by other IRS tax law certified volunteer preparers. Peer-to-peer is the other. In this process, any IRS tax law certified volunteer preparer may quality review returns of another preparer when the site is not able to use a designated review method. Self-review, again, is not allowed at the site. Quality review process must include these critical actions involving the taxpayer's participation during the quality review to confirm they understand and agree with the information on the tax return. Review of Form 13614C to ensure proper completion, and review of all supporting documentation and other information provided by the taxpayer to confirm all items were entered correctly on the return. The process also includes correction of errors identified on the Form 13614C, verification that all items listed in the quality review checklist and in publication 4012 are addressed when reviewing the return, review of tax law references, that's the publication 4012 and the publication 17, to verify the accuracy of tax law determinations. If there's anything that you have a question or concern about that you're not sure, it's going to always reference you to your publications 4012 and publication 17 to help find the answer. You can also go to an experienced preparer or your site or assistant site coordinator to get an answer if there's something that you're not sure on. You want to inform the taxpayers before they sign the return of their responsibility for information on their return. Emphasize that by signing the tax return, they declare under penalty of perjury that they have examined the return and its accompanying forms and schedules for accuracy. You want to always ensure that they understand what it is that they are signing before they sign. The final steps of the quality review process. The quality review process is complete when all errors have been corrected on the return. If errors are found during the quality review, the corrected return must be reviewed by the quality reviewer to ensure that all errors were addressed. A best practice is to compare the returns to the prior year's tax returns if that is available to ensure nothing was overlooked from the previous year. And we know most times taxpayers are not going to bring in a copy of their return from the previous year for that to happen. Most times they're going to let you know that if their refund amount, if they're expecting a certain refund amount or their refund amount to be the same as the prior year, they'll question why it's different, what has changed, and they'll look over the return and kind of know what's missing so that you'll have a chance to do a second look. Finally, the quality reviewer asks one last time if the taxpayer has any questions prior to printing the return and before the taxpayer signs the return. And so we want to always ensure that we've answered any questions or concerns that the taxpayer have, so that if anything needs to be changed, that can be done before the return is printed, and so that you won't have to reprint that return or discard any of that unnecessary paper. Sites must provide at a minimum the taxpayer copy print set to taxpayers. The below worksheets have been included in the taxpayer copy print set and will only be printed if they are relevant to the return. And the software, the site coordinators have already set up the software to know what is going to print when you hit print after quality reviewing for that taxpayer. It's not going to print unnecessary papers or documentation. It's only going to print what is necessary for that taxpayer to have. It'll include things like the simplified method worksheet if that was used on a 1099-R, a Social Security benefits worksheet, the standard deduction worksheet for dependents, EIC worksheets, and the student loan interest deduction. All of those different type of worksheets will be included with that taxpayer copy of that return. We know that the taxpayer has a signature requirement in order for that return to be transmitted or electronically filed. The taxpayer has to sign agreeing to that. And so the taxpayers must be advised verbally of their responsibility concerning the accuracy of the information they have provided to complete their tax return before signing. The best practice is to advise the taxpayer of their responsibility. Should be completed after the quality review, but prior to the taxpayer signing their return. So before that taxpayer picks up that pen, pencil, whatever you use to get them to sign, you want to always advise that their signature is to ensure that they agree with the information that's listed on their return, and that they agree that it's true to the best of their knowledge. The requirement for having taxpayers sign the tax return is outlined in both publication 1345, which is the authorized IRS e-file providers of individual income tax returns, and the publication 4299, which is the privacy, confidentiality, and civil rights of public trust publication. Taxpayers filing a joint tax return, both must be present at the site to validate proof of their identity and then sign their tax return. The tax return must not be e-filed, nor a copy provided to the taxpayer till both signatures are secured on the tax return or on Form 8879, which is the IRS e-file signature authorization. Exception for signing the return for taxpayers known to the site. A taxpayer who is filing a joint tax return can be given permission by the site coordinator to take Form 8879 to a missing spouse to secure his or her signature if both taxpayers are known to the site. However, the tax return cannot be e-filed for the taxpayers till both signatures are secured on that Form 8879. And so again, that's going to be a conversation that you will need to have with the site coordinator to find out or figure out what that process is if a married filing joint return and one of the spouses is not available.
Okay.
This page lists all references that were covered in this training. Of course, the Form 13614C that we went over on last night, that's the intake, interview, and quality review sheet that every taxpayer must complete when they are getting their return prepared. The Form 14446 is the virtual taxpayer consent. That form is normally attached to the 13614C for that taxpayer to sign, but the consents are also built into the software. Publication 17, publication 524, the publication 4012 is your VITA TCE volunteer resource guide. I highly suggest that if you do not have a copy of this publication, whether it's a hard copy or an electronic copy, that you get one. It is important to have so that you have any questions about anything, whether it's income, deductions, credits, anything like that. That publication 4012 is going to be your resource. Again, the publication 4299, the publication 5166, which covers the quality site requirements, and the publication 5838, which is the VITA TCE intake, interview, and quality review. And that's a new publication for this year. Any questions or concerns as it relates to the intake, interview, and quality review process? No. In this course, you have learned that intake, interview, and quality review are three distinct processes. SPEC has determined there is a direct correlation between the proper use of Form 13614C and the preparation of an accurate tax return. Form 13614C is required to be fully completed for every tax return prepared at a VITA TCE site before tax return preparation begins. Volunteers certified in intake, interview, and quality review may assist taxpayers in completing Form 13614C. Only IRS tax law certified volunteers may answer taxpayers' questions related to tax law on Form 13614C. Every tax return prepared at a VITA TCE site must have a quality review completed using the quality review checklist in publication 4012. Quality review must include the taxpayer. All taxpayers must be informed verbally before they sign the tax return of their responsibility for the information listed on the tax return. Tax return must not be transmitted before a quality review is completed and the taxpayer has signed the Form 8879, which is the IRS e-file signature authorization. The purpose of following a consistent intake, interview, and quality review process was covered in this training, the different sections of the Form 13614C, the basic steps of a complete intake process, interview process, and the quality review process. Any questions or concerns as it relates to intake, interview, and quality review? All right. Just like on last night, the publication 6744. Does someone have a question?
I need 2 number 1s, make 1 spicy.
Give me a minute. You gotta mute the file.
Okay.
All right, just like on last night, the 6744 is your publication that has your test questions for your certification. And so if you don't have it, that's fine. But what we are going to do is to go over those questions as it relates to the intake, interview, and quality review test or certification. And so if you don't have the publication where you're able to notate those answers, I suggest that you get a pencil and paper and write these down.
Rucker. Ms. Rucker,
Uh-huh.
publication has this in it.
I can't hear you.
Which publication has this in it?
The 6744. It's form 6744. So if you're searching for it on irs.gov, you're going to type in form 6744 and it will pull this book up.
Got it, thank you.
All right. And that's what the 6744 looks like in electronic or hard copy. And that's going to have all of your questions for your certifications in it. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So these following questions is your certification for this particular training. And so once we are finished, you're able to plug those answers into your certification and have that certification complete. All right. So the first question says, all IRS certified volunteer preparers participating in the VITA TCE programs must use Form 13614C or Form 13614NR, along with a thorough interview for every return prepared at the site. Is that true or false?
True. True.
That's correct. That's true. What must a certified volunteer preparer do with Form 13614C before starting the tax return? Make sure all questions on the Form 13614C are answered. Change unsure answers to yes or no based on a conversation with the taxpayer. Determine the certification level required to complete the return, or D, all of the above.
D, all of the above. D as in dog.
D as in Delta.
That's correct. The
Okay.
answer is D.
Okay.
Number 3 says the basic certification level is required to prepare a return with tip income. Is that true or false?
So the basic certification.
So if you're
false.
certified at the basic level, can you prepare a return if that taxpayer says that they have tip income?
No, false.
That's correct. The answer is B, false. Number 4 says a date must be entered on Form 13614C, Part 2, marital status and household information to determine the appropriate filing status for taxpayers who are A, divorced, B, legally separated, C, widowed, or D, all of the above.
All of the above.
D. D. As in Delta.
That's correct. The answer is D. For number 4, the answer is D as in David. Number 5 says VITA TCE volunteers use publication 4299, privacy, confidentiality, and civil rights, a public trust to determine if a return is within scope. Is that true or false?
False. I haven't seen a 5299.
4299.
Oh, 4299.
Mhm.
Oh. True.
The answer is actually false. So that's the publication 4299 is not going to advise you of what is in scope within the VITA TCE program. We are going to go over that, but that scope of service chart can be found in your publication 4012.
Okay, so 5 is false.
Mhm. Number 6 says VITA TCE sites are required to conduct quality reviews for all returns prepared by volunteers who have less than 2 years of experience preparing returns. For every return prepared at the site, only when there is a quality reviewer available. For all returns prepared by volunteers with certification levels below advanced, military, or international.
B.
B.
The answer is B. For every return prepared at that site. At the site, every return should be quality reviewed. Number 7 says in most cases, a volunteer must review photo identification for every taxpayer to prevent the possibility of identity theft. Is that true or false?
True.
That's correct. The answer is true. A.
Stop by and check on y'all.
Okay. Should I put this stuff back up or?
Yeah, go ahead and put that back up, because
Okay.
I'm trying to get one of my guys to come over.
Mute the phone.
Can you put yourself on mute if you're not asking
Oh.
questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Number 8 says, when does a taxpayer sign the tax return? Is that before the quality review and before being advised of their responsibility for the accuracy of the information on the return? Before quality review and after being advised of their responsibility for the accuracy of the return? After quality review and before being advised of their responsibility for the accuracy of the information? Or D, after quality review and after being advised of their responsibility for the accuracy of the information on the return?
D as in David.
That's correct. Number 8 is D. Number 9 says the site is busy with many taxpayers waiting for assistance. All volunteers are busy preparing tax returns. Can you quality review the return you just prepared instead of waiting for someone else to quality review the return? A says yes if it is a returning taxpayer. B, yes with approval of the site coordinator. C says no, self-review is never an acceptable quality review method. And D says no unless you are certified at the advanced level.
C.
That's correct. The answer is C. Self-review is never an acceptable quality review method. Number 10 said, which of the following is true? Quality review can be conducted by a volunteer preparer certified at basic when the tax return required an advanced certification to prepare. Quality review is conducted after the taxpayer signs a tax return. Quality review is an effective tool for preparing an accurate tax return, and taxpayers do not need to be involved in the quality review process.
C.
C.
That's correct. The answer is C. It is an effective tool for preparing an accurate tax return. Any questions or concerns as it relates to the intake, interview, and quality review process, training, or certification? No?
No.
All right, so the next thing that we're going to look at is the scope of service. This scope of service chart, again, can be found in your publication 4012. It begins at page 8 in that publication. So it advises you that when you're using this list, please note that this scope of service chart, the answers in column 3, does not stand alone. Additional information contained in columns 4 and 5, scope limitations and certification levels, may include topics or certification levels that affect whether volunteers may or may not prepare the return under the provisions of the Volunteer Protection Act. If no certification level is listed, the topic is in scope for all certification levels. Many forms and schedules that are out of scope are included as reference. If a form or schedule is not listed, it is out of scope because no training has been provided. In addition, if a volunteer has not been trained on an in-scope tax law topic, that topic is out of scope for that volunteer. So even though it may show in scope for the VITA TCE program, if you are not trained on it, then that means it's out of scope for you. And so if at any point you are uncomfortable, don't know as it relates to a form, a type of income, a tax law, a deduction, a credit, if you don't know, then I'm going to always tell you to ask, whether that's an experienced tax return preparer or your site or assistant site coordinator. Don't ever guess, take a shot in the dark, any of that, because you guessing, while it could be right, it could be wrong. And we would rather be right than wrong. So if you look at this chart, it lists the form numbers. It tells you the line or the box number and whether or not column 3 shows whether it's in scope with a Y or N for yes or no. There are, in the 4th column, there are scope limitations. And the 5th box or column shows certification levels required for that type of income. So line 2 shows the 1040, line 1 shows that it's in scope. It relates to wages, salaries, and tips. The certification level says advanced certification is required for unreported tip income. The form 1040, as it relates to IRAs, pensions, and annuities, basic certification if the taxable amount is determined. But if you're looking at that 1099-R and that box 2 doesn't show that the taxable amount is there, then that's beyond the basic certification, because then you'll have to use another method to determine what that tax is. We know that if it does not show anything in the certification level column, then that means it's in scope for all certification levels. For instance, the Social Security benefits don't show a certification level. That means if you're just certified to the basic level, you can do Social Security benefits if the taxpayer has that type of income. Itemized deductions require an advanced certification requirement. And so you can, if you have your publication 4012, electronic or hard copy, then I would suggest that you go through on this column at some point to determine what's in scope and what is not in scope. Any questions or concerns as it relates to scope of service?
And so if it's blank, you said that it's you're good if it's blank. I mean,
Yes. So if the certification level column doesn't show anything, then that means that any certification level can handle that, like for educator expenses. Schedule 1, line 11. If you're just certified to the basic certification level, then you can do a return that has educator expenses. Schedule 1, line 13, dealing with the health savings account deduction. Advanced certification is required. So you want to always be mindful of that.
And the first column has the form, like the schedule, the number and all that.
Right, so S is for schedule, and then they have F for form.
And so when it says no, it has, so no means, basic can't, basic can't do.
No, so if it says no,
Uh-huh.
then that means it's not in scope for the program,
For the who?
for the VITA TCE program. So like for Schedule 2, on line 20, it for the Section 965 net tax liability installment, relating to a Form 965A, that's out of scope for the VITA TCE program. Schedule 2, line 12, net investment income tax, that's not in scope. If a taxpayer has interest on tax due on an installment income from the sale of certain residential lots and timeshares, that's not in scope for the VITA TCE program. Sometimes these schedules and the type of income that the taxpayer has is beyond the scope of the VITA TCE program, and at that point, they'll have to be referred to a paid preparer so that they can dive deeper into the type of form that's required for that type of income. So if a taxpayer presents with some sort of form, some sort of income that you're not sure of, you can always go to this scope chart to determine whether or not that type of form or that type of income is in scope within the VITA TCE program.
If you have any questions, just ask our coordinator.
Right, you're gonna I will always refer you to your coordinator.
Y'all killing me. You okay?
Any questions or concerns?
Potty? Outside, go.
Mute the phone.
Uh-oh.
So we know this scope of service chart starts on page 8 of the publication 4012. And it runs through page 23.
So the information the taxpayer brings to you won't necessarily say what a form is or whatever. It'll just be, you have to kind of look on here to see, like they come in with the information. You know, you're gonna have to just kind of go here and see what it is and see if that's a part of the program. So you have,
Right.
it won't, like the piece of paper won't say Form 20 or whatever it is. You're gonna have to just figure out what it is as you look at the scope, what the information they're bringing to you, and then
Right.
Okay.
And so and most times if you're a preparer, you won't have to do that. The intake interview person that goes through that interview with that taxpayer and they'll be able to determine whether or not that income is in scope for the VITA TCE program before it even gets to a preparer. And so that's kind of one of the responsibilities and the reason why that intake and interview is so important. So that before that taxpayer even gets to you and you start on their return, you know that that person is in scope for the VITA TCE program along with whatever documentation they have. And so that's the intake person is going to go through the documentation that that taxpayer presents to determine whether or not they are in scope for the VITA TCE program.
All right, that makes sense. Thanks.
Any additional questions or concerns? All right. Does everyone have access to the publication 4491?
Yes.
Yes.
What I want to do is to give you a few minutes to read over the important changes for 2023. That starts on page 11 of the publication 4491. And then we'll take a few minutes to read over the temporary provisions for 2023, which starts also in this publication on page 29. Does anyone not have access to the publication 4491?
I do not.
Okay.
It's in the chat, the link to the digital copies in the chat.
Okay.
Ms. Rucker, you said start on page 11 and go through what?
The important changes start on page 11 and they go through. They end on page 15.
Okay.
And just, let's take just a few minutes to read through those. And then we'll go over 'em.
I'm sorry to have you repeat yourself. From what page to what page?
It starts on page 11 of your publication 4491, and it goes through page 15.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it.
Excuse me, for the 4491, should I be looking at the training guide? Because mine's have like a lesson.
So the publication 4491 is the training guide, but it also has the important changes.
Is that in what section? Is it in section 2?
It says IX at the bottom of the page, but it's page 11.
Okay, IX.
Mhm. I'm gonna give about another 3 to 4 minutes and then we'll pick back up. All right. So there are some important changes for 2023 that we want to look at and recognize. The due date for filing individual income tax returns for 2023 is April 15th, 2024. April 17th, if you live in Maine or Massachusetts. There have been some tax form changes. The publication 535, which covers business expenses, is now historical. The 2022 edition will be the final revision available. There's a new form 7206, which covers self-employed health insurance deduction. It replaces a worksheet that was normally found in the publication 535. Anyone electronically filing Form 1040X, which is an amended U.S. individual tax return, can select direct deposit and enter their banking and financial institution information for quicker delivery of refunds. It refers you in the next section to the lessons to get more in detail as it regards to new provisions, such as the distributions to qualified public safety employees, the distributions to terminally ill individuals, repayment of qualified birth or adoption distributions, certain corrective distributions not subject to 10% early distribution tax. The temporary 100% business deduction for food or beverages from restaurants ended December 31st, 2022. So that provision has expired. As you know, that the personal exemption amount was suspended or reduced to zero. That became effective in 2018, and that goes through 2025 unless something changes. But as for this year, it remains the same. The dollar amount or deduction amount for all personal exemptions have still been reduced or suspended or reduced to zero. There are certain expenses for elementary and secondary school teachers. Is no change from last year. The amount of the deduction allowed consists of expenses paid or incurred by an eligible educator for use in the classroom. That deduction amount is $300. So no matter what they spent as a teacher for expenses for the classroom, the deduction is only up to $300. The standard deduction for taxpayers changed, and these are for taxpayers or individuals who do not itemize on a Schedule A. The standard deduction amounts for 2023 is $27,700, which is an increase of $1,800 for married filing joint or qualifying surviving spouse. The head of household had an increase of $1,400 to make it $20,800 this year. And single or married filing separate increased by $900, which made the total $13,850. There's additional increases for taxpayers who are 65 and older or blind. It increased by $100 for each. Single or head of household is $1,850. Married taxpayers or qualifying surviving spouses is $1,500. For 2023, the standard deduction amount for an individual who may be claimed as a dependent by another taxpayer cannot exceed the greater of either $1,250 or the sum of $400 and the individual's earned income. If they're subject to the kiddie tax, the individual must have unearned income of at least $2,500. For 2023, for the standard mileage rate, that's listed there, 65.5 for business miles, 22 for medical or moving, 14 cents for service of charitable organizations. The deduction for the qualified business income, the threshold amount for 2023 is $364,200 for married filing joint, $1,821 for all other returns. The modified adjusted gross income for the retirement savings credit is listed there. The earned income credit amount increased to $74.30 for with 3 or more children, $66.04 for 2 children, $39.95 with 1 child, or $600 with no children. There is a limitation on the amount of earned income and adjusted gross income for a taxpayer in order to be able to qualify for the earned income. With 3 or more qualifying children, it's $56,838 for if they are not married filing joint. With 2 qualifying children, it's $52,918. 1 child's $46,560, and with no qualifying children, it's $17,640. Taxpayers whose investment income is more than $11,000 cannot claim the EIC. The child tax credit and additional child tax credit amount, the refundable amount for that credit is $1,600. Student loan interest begins to phase out with taxpayers who have a modified adjusted gross income of $75,000 or more. It talks about the foreign earned income exclusion, the IRA deduction amount, and modified AGI limits for traditional and Roth IRA contributions. It talks about the repayment caps for the advanced premium tax credit for 2023, and we'll get more to that in that lesson. Filing thresholds and federal private line tables are adjusted for inflation. The last thing talks about the health savings account or HSA deduction. For 2023, the annual contribution limits on deductions for HSAs for individuals with self-only coverage is $3,850, which is an increase of $200, and $7,750 for family coverage, which is an increase of $450. There is an additional contribution amount of $1,000 for taxpayers who are age 55 and older. If there are additional changes that are not listed in this publication 4491, or because the publication may have already been published before those changes took effect, you can see any additional changes in the publication 4491X, which is a training supplement to this initial publication 4491. And that publication is normally available in mid-January on irs.gov. Any questions or concerns as it relates to changes for 2023? All right. On page 29 of this same publication, it talks about temporary provisions. Let's take a few minutes to read through those. We're still in the same publication. We just went to page 29 where it starts for temporary provisions.
What we doing now? What we doing now? I'm sorry, I had to step away. What we doing now?
We are reading the temporary provisions in publication 4491, beginning on page 29.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right, picking back up in publication 4491 on page 29. It shows temporary provisions. It says some of the provisions contained in this lesson have been commonly referred to as extenders. Others are temporary provisions contained in recent legislation. In some instances, these provisions modify only portions of the existing law. In those cases, we have included caution statements in the affected lessons, redirecting volunteers to explore the temporary modifications in that lesson. Some temporary provisions that's discussed here are the student loan forgiveness, the employer provided educational assistance, higher education emergency financial aid grants, and cancellation of debt on a principal residence. Taxpayers who made timely repayments in 2023 of their 2020 coronavirus related distributions may amend their prior year return to claim the repayment. And it refers you to the retirement income lesson that we will go through. We'll probably touch on that lesson on tomorrow. The expansion through 2025 or the premium tax credit is covered in the premium tax credit lesson. Student loan forgiveness is one of the first. An exclusion from gross income is available for student loan forgiveness after 2020 and before 2026 for most forgiven student loans. If eligible for the exclusion, the lender should not issue Form 1099-C. Certain employer payments of student loans. Employers may provide a student loan repayment benefit to employees on a tax-free basis. Under the provision, an employee may contribute up to $5,250 annually toward an employee's student loans, and such payment will be excluded from the employee's income. The $5,250 cap applies to both the new student loan repayment benefit as well as other educational assistance provided by the employer. This provision has been extended through 2025. The higher education emergency financial aid grants. Under the CARES Act for unexpected expenses, unmet financial need, or expenses related to the disruption of campus operations due to the COVID-19 pandemic, such as unexpected expenses for food, housing, childcare, are the disaster relief payments under Section 139 of the Internal Revenue Code. Available through September 30th, 2023, this grant is not includable in gross income. Further, the student's qualified education expenses are not reduced for this non-taxable grant for an educational benefit. Cancellation of debt is not something that you see regularly. It could be, but the cancellation of debt as it relates to principal residence. Cancellation of credit card debt is included in the other income lesson of this publication for advanced certification. Exclusion from gross income of qualified principal residence indebtedness has been extended through 2025 on a modified basis. Anytime the taxpayer has a cancellation of debt, they should present you with a Form 1099-C. In scope for the VITA TCE programs, it refers you to publication 4731A, which is a screening sheet for foreclosures or abandonments and cancellation of debt to ensure that the tax return being prepared is within the scope of the VITA TCE programs. This screening sheet is contained in the Volunteer Resource Guide, Legislation Extenders tab, which is your publication 4012. It refers you to the publication 4731 for different parts. Part 1 is for taxpayers with Form 1099-A for foreclosure or abandonment of their principal residence. Part 2 is for taxpayers that have the Form 1099-C or Form 1099-A and 1099-C resulting from cancellation of debt on a home mortgage loan. There are two types of debts, recourse and non-recourse. A recourse debt holds the borrower personally liable. All other debt is considered non-recourse. You can read more about recourse and non-recourse debt there. Exceptions and exclusions. Some canceled or forgiven debts may be eliminated from income by applying exceptions or reduced by applying exclusions to the general rule. Exceptions are applied before exclusions. Exceptions may allow the taxpayer to eliminate the following types of canceled debt from income. Amounts otherwise excluded, such as gifts, certain student loans, in addition to the general exclusion noted above, deductible debt, price reduced after purchase. It refers you to the publication 4681 for more information on exceptions. There are several exclusions from the general rule for reporting canceled debt as income. The Form 982, which is a reduction of tax attributes due to discharge of indebtedness, must be filed with the taxpayer's return to show the amount of the canceled debt excluded. It tells you what those exclusions are, such as discharge of debt through bankruptcy, insolvent taxpayers, and discharge of qualified residents, principal residents, indebtedness. The issues involved in exclusions can be complex. Only cancellation of qualified principal residence indebtedness exclusion is within the scope of VITA TCE. So again, you want to always refer to that chart if you are unsure on whether the taxpayer, the form that the taxpayer has brought you is within the scope. This talks more about that discharge of qualified principal residence indebtedness. Taxpayers may include from income certain debt forgiven or canceled on their principal residence. They will have the Form 1099-A if any type of debt has been issued or forgiven. They'll have the 1099-C if the debt is canceled. And so they should, if they bring up any type of information like that, they should have either the 1099-A or the 1099-C. Are there any questions as it relates to temporary provisions? Foreclosures and capital gain or loss. If a taxpayer does not make payments owed on a loan secured by property, the lender may foreclose on the loan or repossess the property. The foreclosure or repossession is treated as a sale from which the taxpayer may realize a gain or loss. This is true even if the taxpayer voluntarily returns the property to the lender. There's a worksheet in the publication 4681 to figure the ordinary income from the cancellation of debt and the gain or loss from foreclosure or repossession. And so it's just going to depend on the type of form, again, that taxpayer brings you in. You need to refer to that chart to determine whether or not you can assist that taxpayer. Here, it talked about the 1099-A, that's the acquisition of or abandonment of secured property. 1099-C is a cancellation of debt. And we know that some taxpayers will present with the 1099-C cancellation of debt if they have had credit card debt discharged. And so if they mention that to you, they need to also present that form. You can't just take their word for it when they are stating they have some sort of cancellation of debt. It says lenders or creditors are required to issue the Form 1099-C if they cancel a debt owed to them of $600 or more. Generally, an individual taxpayer must include all canceled amounts, even if less than $600 on the other income line of Form 1040 Schedule 1. It talks more about the coordination with Form 1099-A, mortgage workouts, and Form 1099-C. It talks about gain or loss reported on the Form 8949 and the Schedule D. Schedule 8, Form 8949 sales and other dispositions of capital assets include all capital gain and loss transactions. For more information on how to report the gain or losses, it refers you to the publication 4012, which is your volunteer resource guide. Tab D, capital gain or losses on the sale of a main home. Any questions or concerns? This is what a 1099-C looks like. If a taxpayer has any type of cancellation of debt, they're going to be issued this 1099-C if that amount is over $600 to have all the information you need in order to input that. This is a screenshot of what the Form 8949 looks like. The top page on page 38 shows you the Schedule D, the Part 2 of a Schedule D. Any information that you enter automatically populates to the applicable schedule that it needs, schedule or form that it needs to populate. So if you input any information from a 1099 DIV, and it should be on a Schedule D or any other particular form, then it's going to automatically populate. You won't have to populate that form. The text software will do that for you. This is what the top part of the Form 982 looks like. Again, that's a 1099-C and the Form 982. Any questions or concerns as it relates to temporary provisions? All right, let's take a 10-minute break before we hop into the tax law portion of the training, if we don't have any questions or concerns. All right, so let's be back at 7:25 so that we can hop right into the tax law portion of this training. All right, is everyone back? You all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So as we jump into the tax law portion of this training, this course overview goes into what you will learn. And we talked about on yesterday what the VITA TCE return preparation process consists of. That's the VITA TCE volunteer standards of conduct that we've done on tax law training, what we're about to get into. It involves research skills. That means using your references, resources, and tools, including the TaxSlayer or return preparation software. It talks about the intake, interview, and quality review training that we've completed, as well as tax return preparation, and that includes screening and interviewing taxpayers. We learned that all volunteers must pass the VITA TCE Volunteer Standards of Conduct ethics test. That test is available in your publication 4961, but we always encourage you to complete your certifications electronically using your VITA TCE Central Certification website or the Lincoln Learn landing page that I showed you on yesterday. It also talks about how all tax preparers, quality reviewers, instructors, and site coordinators must pass the intake, interview, and quality review test. The Form 6744 that we have been using includes the volunteer standards of conduct and the intake, interview, and quality review test, as well as other certifications that you will need to complete. We talked about how you must have your Form 13615 signed and dated, because that form shows what certification levels you are certified at to the site coordinator that you are volunteering for. This is a look at the certification paths that you can take. The certification paths include basic and advanced. I always encourage volunteers to certify at the advanced level. You don't have to do both. The advanced level encompasses the basic. And so if you take the advanced, then that means that you are certified to do most tax returns that are presented at the site. Optional specialty courses include military and international, as well as Puerto Rico and foreign student. And so if you choose to take those certifications, you are more than welcome to. You are not required to have those certifications, but you are required to have some sort of tax law certification completed in order for you to be a preparer in the VITA TCE program. Of course, we know that the steps in order for you to get certified is for you to complete these tax law courses, which is what we're going to start tonight and go through on tomorrow. Complete the volunteer standards of conduct or the VSC training and pass that test with at least 80%. Complete and sign and date your Form 13615 and complete the intake, interview, and quality review training and pass that test. It says that you can must also pass at least basic certification if you are preparing returns with at least 80%. This is what the top part of that 13615 looks like.
I have a question.
Okay.
When will you go over the advanced, the stuff for the advanced exam?
After tax law is completed. So
Okay.
if
And you said we'll complete that tonight?
no, we'll start it tonight.
Oh,
We
we'll
won't
start
get
it
through with
tonight.
it tonight, but hopefully we'll get through with it on tomorrow. And
Uh-huh.
so, and then that way, if we get through and finish all of the tax law training by tomorrow evening, then that means on Thursday, we'll have the entire time to work through the practice lab and getting the certifications, the certification information completed in order for you
Okay.
to do it. So what I'll do is to get you through as much of the advanced certification that I can with the time that we have. And so My hope is to get through the entire certification. I don't know if we'll have time, but hopefully if we do, because that certification requires that you complete 3 of the scenarios are tax returns that you will complete in the practice lab.
Okay,
And so if we're able to do that together on Thursday, then we'll do as much as we can.
okay, thank you.
All right. This says to remember that you're going to only assist with returns, supporting schedules and forms for which you have been trained and certified. Don't ever try to step outside of the scope of your certification or training in order to complete a return. If at any time, I can't say this enough, if at any time you are uncomfortable, you don't know, you need assistance, ask for it. Do not try to complete any type of return, any type of schedule, any type of form, if there's something that you do not know. Always ask. If that answer cannot be found within your site coordinator or another experienced tax return preparer, the TaxSlayer has resources available for you to ask questions. Taxpayers with situations outside the scope of the VITA TCE programs must be referred to the site coordinator and/or professional tax preparer. Out-of-scope topics are identified in each lesson. And so although you have your scope of service chart, each lesson that we go through will advise you of what is out of scope for that particular lesson. It refers you to the scope of service chart that's located in the publication 4012. We talked about identity theft on last evening. There are 2 types of tax-related identity theft. That's employment and fraudulent filing. Identity protection pins, or the IP pin, is issued to taxpayers who have been victims of identity theft and who have provided the necessary documentation to the Internal Revenue Service. That taxpayer with an IP pin validates the taxpayer as the owner of that SSN. If a taxpayer has contacted the Internal Revenue Service to let them know that they have been the victim of identity theft and an IP pin has been issued for that particular taxpayer, they must have it in order to have their return electronically filed. That return will reject if that IP pin is not listed there because the system already has them linked or notated as an identity theft victim. And they must have that IP pin. If they don't have it, if they've lost it, if they don't know what happened to it, then they're not able to electronically file their return. That return must be mailed in. The Form 1040 includes boxes for the IP pin, and taxpayers are issued that letter normally within the latter part of the year so that they can have it for filing season. Again, we went over your volunteer responsibilities. You are protected from personal liability as a volunteer, as long as you act within the scope of your responsibility, as long as you were trained and certified and you committed no willful, criminal, reckless, grossly negligent, conscious, or flagrant indifferent acts during your volunteer capability. You may not accept any payment of any kind. This goes against the volunteer standards of conduct. There are 6 volunteer standards of conduct that we went over, along with 10 quality site requirements. Those can be found in your publication 5166. Again, the IP pin that a taxpayer receives validates them as the owner of the SSN. We want to always practice due diligence to ensure the information on the return is correct and complete to the best of our ability and knowledge. You want to always maintain the taxpayer's trust by protecting them from identity theft. We want to treat all taxpayer information as it is confidential. There is an identity theft job aid in the publication 4012. It refers you to the publication 4299 on how else you can maintain the taxpayer trust. The taxpayer civil rights include freedom from discrimination and reasonable accommodation for disabilities. These are references that you can always refer back to if you need assistance. There is a Form 13614C job aid that's available. the publication 17, the publication 3, the publication 596. I always advise of the publication 4012. There's a volunteer hotline for volunteers. This number is not to be given to taxpayers. Again, the 4012 is your step-by-step guide for procedures on electronically return preparation. It gives you a link to the TaxSlayer tax preparation software and any tutorials you may need in order to use that. And it also gives you information on the Taxpayer Advocate Service. We want to always make sure that you have the resources and support you need to provide each taxpayer with high quality service and an accurate return. That looks like having your resources available, whether electronically or in a hard copy version. Know where to go if you don't know the answer. That's going to always be to your resources, to the irs.gov website, to the TaxSlayer website or blog or support services that they have. You can always refer to an expert or a tax preparer that has more experience. And you can go to your site coordinator or assistant site coordinator if you need further assistance. A return is accurate when tax law is applied correctly, and the return is free from error based on the taxpayer's interview and supporting documentation and a completed 13614C. You want to always know what your role and responsibilities are as a volunteer to this program and adhere to those volunteer standards of conduct. Always ensure that you are practicing and following due diligence. Only prepare returns that are within the scope of the VITA TCE program and within your certification level. Use the equipment and supplies that have been issued to you under this VITA TCE program for their intended purposes. And know the procedures for helping a taxpayer with identity theft if needed. Any questions or concerns? All right. The next lesson that we are going to cover, or the first lesson in tax law that we are going to cover, is the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, or ACA, and it is formerly known, changed the existing health insurance market by prohibiting insurers from denying coverage or charging higher premiums because of the individual's pre-existing condition. It created the health insurance marketplace, and it provides a premium tax credit that eligible taxpayers may be able to claim on their federal income tax returns.
Excuse me, Ms. Rucker. Where are you reading from?
These are slides that are available. If you want to look at the slides yourself, they are available on the Link and Learn landing page.
They're on which page now?
Link and Learn. Let me see if I have it. Oh, so if you're on the Link and Learn or the VITA TCE Central Link Learn Taxes Certification page, it's under Instructor Tools. It's the classroom presentations is what I'm using.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions before we continue? All right. So the objective of this lesson for the Affordable Care Act is to determine who is eligible for the premium tax credit, calculate the premium tax credit, and report taxpayers' premium tax credit on the tax return. It uses the Form 1095-A in order to determine if a taxpayer qualifies for the premium tax credit. Some definitions or key terms that are associated with ACA is household income, the marketplace, minimum essential coverage, and premium tax credit. There are forms that apply to the ACA. So if a taxpayer tells you that they have insurance through or had insurance during the tax year through the marketplace or through the Affordable Care Act, there are forms. There's a form that they will have to present to you. And these forms may indicate if the taxpayer or a member of the taxpayer household had health care insurance from the marketplace or through an employer. The 1095-A is the health insurance marketplace statement. B and C 1095s are normally issued from your employer, a former taxpayer's employer, and that's not needed to verify that the taxpayer had insurance. Some will bring it. It's not necessary if they advise you they had insurance through their employer. Insurance cards is another. That's not something that we can use to verify. We're not in the business of verifying whether or not the taxpayer had insurance. The only thing that you need to be concerned about it is if they say that they had insurance from the marketplace. With the premium tax credit, taxpayers may choose to have advanced payments of the premium tax credit or the APTC, or get all of the benefit of the premium tax credit when they claim the credit. The 1095-A shows taxpayers who purchase health insurance from the marketplace, and they must present that form to you if they say that they have insurance through the marketplace. Otherwise, their return will reject. With the Affordable Care Act, it deals with the federal poverty line. That's not something that you'll have to remember or know. That information is automatically built into the software. There are federal poverty lines for 48 states, for also DC, Hawaii, and Alaska. If you want to learn more about the federal poverty lines, you can read more on that in the publication 4012. So in order for a taxpayer to claim the premium tax credit, it is done using the Form 8962. And again, all form schedules are automatically populated based on the information that you input on that return for that taxpayer. And so if the taxpayer states that they had insurance through the marketplace, they present you with the Form 1095-A, then you're going to enter that information in the necessary spot in that software, and then it's going to populate the Form 8962. There's nothing for you to figure out whether or not the taxpayer can claim the credit or not. The software does it all for you by the information that you enter. So the Form 8962 must be filed with the tax return if the advanced premium tax credit was paid on the taxpayer behalf, or if it was not paid, but the taxpayer wishes to take the premium tax credit. You should complete Form 8962 only for health insurance coverage and a qualified health plan purchased through a marketplace. This includes a qualified health plan purchased on healthcare.gov or through a state marketplace. Certain circumstances such as divorce may result in a shared policy and may require the taxpayer to complete the Form 8962, Part 4 and 5. If they state that they have a shared policy and it needs to be split, that's out of scope for VITA. And so that can happen when you have married taxpayers and they are filing the return separate for whatever reason. And so they have to do the shared policy of that health insurance from the marketplace. And so at that point, you'll need to refer them outside of the VITA TCE program because that's not something that is in scope for us. The Form 8962 premium tax credit is used to calculate the credit and reconcile the advance payment of the credit. The second lowest cost silver plan, or the SLCSP premium, is determined by the marketplace and included on the Form 1095-A. Taxpayers can use the information on Form 1095-A to compute their premium tax credit on their It's just a 2023 tax return and to reconcile the advance credit payments. Again, that's nothing for you to figure out. The software would do all of that with you once you've entered that information on that 1095-A, from that 1095-A. In order to calculate the premium and calculating the premium tax credit, if the taxpayer has had any type of changes in circumstances, it can affect the actual premium tax credit or the amount of the premium tax credit. And so when taxpayers purchase or obtain health insurance through the marketplace at the beginning of the year or going into the new tax year, whatever their circumstances look like determine what they pay for that insurance. And so if they have changes in their household since they purchased, then it will affect whether or not they get the credit or whether or not it results in anything being owed. And so that can look like increases or decreases in their household income, whether they got married or divorced, whether they either had or adopted a child, or if there have been any other changes in the composition of their household. If they gain or lose eligibility for government-sponsored or employer-sponsored healthcare, and if they have a change in address. All of that plays a part in calculating the correct amount for the premium tax credit. Any questions or concerns as it relates to the Affordable Care Act? So that we know that the Affordable Care Act addresses health insurance coverage and financial assistance options for individuals and families, including the premium tax credit. Only taxpayers who purchase qualified healthcare coverage through the marketplace for themselves or a family member are allowed a PTC, or the premium tax credit. That credit is calculated and the APTC is reconciled on the Form 8962. Taxpayers who receive the Form 1095-A, it will contain all the necessary information in order for that Form 8962 to be completed. The premium tax credit is claimed on Form 1040, Schedule 3. Any excess advance premium tax credit that must be repaid is entered on Form 1040, Schedule 2. Whether you are aware or not, beginning in tax year 2019, the individual share responsibility payment, or the SRP, is reduced to zero. That means the taxpayers who do not have health insurance coverage during the tax year are not required to have an exemption in order to avoid paying that share responsibility payment. Any questions or concerns? One second. Filing basics is the next lesson for us to cover. So this lesson covers who must file a tax return and who should file a tax return. It also covers how to verify the taxpayer's identity and to determine how to file the return. Some key terms that are associated with filing basics is the dependent gross income. The ATIN is an adoption taxpayer identification number. ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number, and tax credits. who must file. Sometimes you have taxpayers that will present and are unsure of whether or not they have a filing requirement. If at any point you are needing assistance to help them determine whether or not they have a filing requirement, there's publications in their publication 4012, there are different charts that you can rely on. There is also an interactive tax assistant that is built into the software to determine if a return needs to be filed. See, okay. So chart in your publication 4012, there's a chart A, and it's for most people who must file. And it tells them tells you, depending on what their filing status is, how old they were at the end of the tax year, and what their gross income was, whether or not they have a filing requirement or who must file. And so you can always refer to that chart. Chart B is for children and other dependents. And chart C is for other situations when you must file. So sometimes you'll have taxpayers who don't have a filing requirement. They didn't earn enough income to meet the filing threshold, but they had federal withholding taken out. And so in that instance, they will file a return to get their federal withholding. So, but if you have taxpayers who don't meet any other qualifications, but they have alternative minimum tax, although that's out of scope for the VITA TCE program, they still have a filing requirement that they must do. If they receive distributions from an HSA, then they have to file in order to reconcile those. If there is self-employment earnings of at least 400. So there are instances where taxpayers must file that's a standalone other than what them meeting the filing threshold for income. Chart D is who should file. And that's the instance where I stated if a taxpayer didn't meet the income requirement, but they had income tax withheld from their pay, then they should file a return in order to get that money back. It's not going to automatically be applied to them. They have to file their return in order to get it. They can file to see if they qualify for the earned income credit. If they qualify for a refundable credit, such as a child and dependent care expenses, American Opportunity, premium tax, they're always encouraged to file those returns in order to take advantage of those credits. Any questions or concerns as it relates to who must file? Again, we talked about who should file, even if they don't have a filing requirement. Again, it refers you to your chart D of who should file in your publication 4012. If they are filing to take a health coverage tax credit that is out of scope for the VITA TCE program. We've discussed how you verify a taxpayer identity. There is a tip in your publication 4491 that advises you on what is acceptable identity documents in order to verify the taxpayer's identity. You want to always check with your site coordinator to see what process they have in place for you to be able to verify the identity and the social security numbers of taxpayers. You want to ensure that you enter names and identification numbers accurately. We know that a key in error is easy to make, which is why there is a second set of eyes that reviews those returns in the quality review process. Well, we want to always just be careful and mindful of the information that we are entering to ensure that it is correct. We want to verify the taxpayer information to protect against identity theft. Remind taxpayers to that the correct information is necessary in order for them to receive age-related tax benefits. That's why it's imperative that they complete that 13614C with all necessary information, and that information is verified and that it is entered correctly. If you are not able to substantiate the identity of a taxpayer, then that is out of scope for the VITA TCE program. We don't ever want to complete a return and we're not able to verify the identity or the social security numbers for taxpayers, a spouse if it applies, or any dependents that they are claiming on those returns. Based on the information that you enter for the taxpayer, it's going to automatically, the software is going to automatically populate the appropriate schedule and form. That's not something that you need to try to figure out. You don't have to figure out if the taxpayer needs the form or the schedule 1 through 3, or if there's the form, the schedule D, or the 8949, if any of those forms are needed. If you enter the information where it is supposed to go in the software is going to automatically populate those schedules and forms for you. The form 1040 SR is a new form that was introduced, I think last year or the year before. That is a U.S. income tax return for seniors. It may be used by taxpayers who are age 65 or older. Schedules 1 to 3 have been created for instances where additional information needs to be carried over to the form 1040 or the form 1040 SR. Schedule 1 is the additional income and adjustments to income. Schedule 2 is additional taxes, and Schedule 3 is additional credits and payments. There is a complete the return lesson. We can go over that return, over that lesson. It's easier for me to show you in the practice lab how you will go through that software. Once we get into the scenarios for the advanced certification and we get into the practice lab, the software that we use for the practice lab is the same software that you will be using as a preparer. And so once you go through practicing those returns, you will get a little bit more comfortable in entering that information and completing a return in that software. E-file is the safest, fastest, and easiest way for a taxpayer to file their return. They are not required to e-file their return, but that is the easiest way for them to have their return filed, and the quickest way for it to be processed and for them to receive a refund. You'll have a lot of taxpayers with a balance due who don't want their returns e-filed. They'll rather file those returns by paper or mail, and it is their right and privilege in order to do so. While we encourage e-file, is not required. If there are any type of questions that you need or frequent, this page shows frequent taxpayer inquiries. It refers you to the publication 17 index, and in your publication 4012, this page is listed. It's considered a partner's resource tab. And so it gives you information that you can provide to the taxpayer if they have questions on setting up an installment agreement, if they need copies of prior year returns, if they want to file an amended return. That tab will give you information as it relates to that, or where you can refer the taxpayer to. Some pitfalls we want to always look out for is Canadian ID numbers. They are similar to Social Security numbers, but they are not valid Social Security numbers. They are they belong to Canadians. There is no way for us to tell the difference if you are not made aware. Be alert for possible indications of fraudulent activity, such as a Form W-2 that is typed or handwritten, or if it has alterations on it that you notice. If there's anything that makes you uncomfortable about any piece of document that a taxpayer gives you, always refer to your site coordinator. Or if you are just uncomfortable with completing that return, you can always not do it. You are not obligated to complete a return that you are not comfortable completing. If a Form W-2 from a company that looks different from other Form W-2 issued by the same company, most times we have repeaters when they are coming in, they work for a company that you may have previously did a return for. And for some reason that W-2 does not look the same. And sometimes there may be something that we catch and sometimes it's not. But if it happens to be something that you catch and it looks different for whatever reason or is suspicious to you, always take that to your coordinator. If there's a suspicious person accompanying the taxpayer, multiple refunds directed to the same address or PO box, employment or earnings that are a basis for refundable credits which are not well documented, and similar returns, the same amount of refunds, same number of dependents, or same number of forms W-2. If it's something that does not cause you suspicion, you don't have to go looking for something. Once you get into the habit of preparing these returns, most of this information become repetitive and something different will stand out to you. And so if something catches your eye or something looks suspicious or something looks noticeable that you have a question about, always question it. You are more than welcome to ask that taxpayer. If you're not comfortable doing it, take it to your site coordinator and let them do it. Out of scope is taxpayers who may qualify for the health coverage tax credit or credit for the repayment of previously taxed income. And taxpayers who you cannot substantiate their identity. They are out of scope for the lesson and for the VITA TCE program altogether. We talked about the charts that are available in your publication 4012 that will help you to decide or help the taxpayer to decide whether or not they must file, and for those who should file. Chart A is for most people who must file. B is for children and other dependents. C is for other situations when you must file, and D is who should file. Individuals who are not required to file should file to claim a refund of withheld taxes or a tax credit for which they qualify, and you want to always ensure that you are verifying that taxpayer's identity. Any questions or concerns?
Hey, yes, ma'am. After this training, will the practice lab be available?
Yes. The practice lab is available to you now. You don't have to wait until the training in order to access the practice lab. The practice lab is available. And so if you're using your publication 6744, it has those scenarios for you. And you can enter those scenarios as many times as you need in order to get comfortable with that software. And so I can go through and show you all the practice lab before we conclude for tonight.
Yes, please. That'd be awesome.
All right.
Sounds great.
Filing status is the next lesson that we'll cover. After this lesson, I'll give you all a 10-minute break or so, and then we'll jump back in. We want to always determine what's the most beneficial filing status allowed for the taxpayer. On the 13614C in part 2 that we looked at last night, it shows the marital status and household information. And so based on what their marital status and household information is, that determines what filing status the taxpayer is allowed. There are 5 filing statuses available to the taxpayer: head of household, married filing joint, married filing separate, qualifying spouse, or single.
LaQuisha, LaQuisha, I think we're still looking at the last PowerPoint or last presentation.
Okay, what do you see now?
The 5 filing statuses. So I think that looks good. Yeah.
Thank you kindly. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
So again, using the 13614C, page 1, part 2, for the taxpayer as it relates to their marital status and household information. Most times the taxpayer is going to come in, they're going to already tell you what their filing status is. They tell you, I've been filing head of household for X number of years. I'm filing married, filing separate. I'm filing married, filing. So they'll come in. A lot of times there only be questions if you qualifying widow status, or sometimes you'll have questions as it relates to head of household, because the taxpayer may not understand or know if they're allowed to claim that status. And so you can go through and assist them with determining what is the filing status is going to give them the better advantage that they are allowed to claim. If at any point you are not sure, there is a filing status decision tree in your publication 4012. However, there is one also built into the software. And so if you get into the software and you are entering that information for that taxpayer and they stop you and say, well, I normally file single, but am I able to file head of household? And if you're not sure, then you can go through that filing status decisions tree in the software, and it asks questions to determine whether or not that taxpayer qualifies for that filing status. So this is not something that you have to figure out on your own. There are resources available to help you help the taxpayer. Filing statuses impacts the calculation of income tax, the amount of standard deduction, and the allowance or limitation of certain credits and deduction. We know that a taxpayer filing married, filing separate are not afforded the same credits as someone filing head of household. That's because of the filing status impact. And so we want to always be mindful of how the filing status that the taxpayer is using affects their allowance for deductions, credits, things like that. In order for a taxpayer to be considered single, on the last day of the year, they could not be married. They have to be either legally separated or divorced, or they are widowed before the first day of the tax year and not remarried within the year. Single may qualify for more beneficial tax statuses. And this is a snapshot of what that decision tree looks like in the publication 4012. It's going to ask, were they married on the last day of the year? And depending on if you say no or yes, or if they say no or yes, it's going to point you to the next question. If they were married on the last day of the year, did you and your spouse live apart all of for the 6 months of the year? And it takes you to a yes or a no. And so that's how you can help determine whether or not that filing status, what that filing status should be for that taxpayer. Married filing joint. This filing status generally is the most beneficial when you are.
I was still, I'm sorry. I was still taking notes from the last slide. Is this available in what publication? So
This tree.
Y'all look. I'm sorry.
The filing status decision tree.
Mm-hmm.
It's
or
in your
the information that you're presenting.
So you can find out about filing statuses in your publication 4012.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Married filing joint, again, is the most beneficial for a married couple. It is only one return that covers both spouses. And sometimes you'll have taxpayers that are not aware that they only have to file one return as a married couple. And so we want to help them to determine what is going to be the most beneficial for them. But in order for them to file married filing joint, they had to be married and live together on the last day of the year. If they lived apart, but they were not legally separated or divorced, they could still file married filing joint. They live together in a recognized common law marriage. You want to be mindful of if someone comes in talking about common law marriage. Tennessee does not recognize common law marriage. And so you want to refer to your publications, refer to your site coordinator or irs.gov as it relates to common law marriage to determine if that's something that you can accept. They did not remarry after their spouse died during the year. Again, it's going to refer you back to your publication 4012. There is a filing status tab in your publication 4012 that goes into detail of the filing statuses, as well as give you that filing status decision tree. Married filing separate. Married taxpayers can decide to file married filing separate. We always want to make them aware when you have taxpayers coming in and they advise you that their filing status is married filing separate. We always want to advise them married filing separate means that some credits may be unavailable to you while others are reduced, and that your taxes can be generally higher for this status. We also want to advise them that their spouse has to file married filing separate. One spouse can't file married filing separate and the other spouse files something different. So they both have to file married filing separate. If one spouse is itemized, do itemized deductions under a married filing separately return, the other spouse also has to file itemized deductions. And so we always want to make them aware of things like that if they present stating that they are married filing separate. Most times you have taxpayers filing married filing separately simply because one spouse owes a debt that the other spouse does not want to be responsible for. And so in that instance, we can make them aware that they can still file married filing joint. And there are resources that are available for the spouse who does not have the debt. There is a complete list of special rules available in your publication 17 as it relates to a spouse having outstanding debt. One of the resources available to them is an inter-spouse allocation. And that's the form 8379. If you have a taxpayer that is used to filing married filing joint, but filing the inter-spouse allocation, they are going to automatically tell you that they need that form 8379 added to their return. You don't see it a lot. I've maybe seen it one or two times in the number in all the years that I've been volunteering with VITA. If that is not something that you are used to or comfortable with doing, you want to reach out to an experienced tax return preparer or your site coordinator. Head of household is generally the one that you'll see the most. It says that analysis of a living situation is critical. Most times you're going to have a taxpayer come in and they're going to automatically tell you that they are filing head of household. I've always filed head of household. There is nothing that you need to argue with this taxpayer about. You don't need to verify if those kids are theirs, if the dependent they're claiming is theirs. That's what the exam department at the Internal Revenue Service is for. A taxpayer qualifies for head of household if they are unmarried or considered unmarried on the last day of the tax year. They paid more than 50% cost of keeping up a home for the required period of time. and have had a qualifying person living with them more than half the year. The qualifying person for head of household for that taxpayer can be a child, parent, or other relative. It refers you to the filing status tab in your publication 4012 of who is a qualifying person. In order to be considered unmarried for head of household's purpose, they can file head of household if they file a return separate from their spouse. They pay more than 50% cost of keeping up their home. They lived apart from their spouse during the entire last 6 months of the tax year. And they provided the main home for more than half the year of a qualifying child, stepchild, or an authorized foster child. And that means that they can be considered unmarried and use the head of household filing status. Again, I'm going to always refer you back to your interactive tax assistance if there's a question on what filing status is better or allowed for their taxpayer based on the information they presented to you. And so you want to always use those. The interactive one, there's one available on irs.gov. There's one built into the TaxSlayer software, and there's that chart in your publication 4012. You will need information from the taxpayer in order to complete these interactive assistance. You have a lot of taxpayers, especially older taxpayers, that are coming in. And I think that they qualify for the surviving spouse filing status. It's just as beneficial as married filing joint. However, it is only available for the 2 years following the year of the spouse's death. And so if they say that they want to file as a qualifying spouse, you have to ask them what year did your spouse die? Most times they will complete it on the form 13614C in part 2. Sometimes they won't. They'll just tell you that they want the qualifying spouse, because some assume that they can take their qualifying spouse filing status for years, and that's not true. They must have a dependent in order for them to qualify for that filing status. So just, even though they advise you that their spouse has died or passed, if they do not have a qualifying dependent, then they are not qualified to have the married qualifying surviving spouse filing status. Again, it refers you to your publication 4012 for the rules as it relates to this filing status. Any questions or concerns as it relates to filing statuses? All right. There are
Hi,
five.
Ms. LaQuisha.
Uh-huh.
I apologize for interrupting. It looks like there was a message in the chat requesting that if you're able to slow down.
Okay,
not
I'm
sure
sorry.
if you were able to see that.
I don't have the chat open.
No worries.
Thank you so much. There are 5 filing statuses: single, married filing joint, married filing separate, head of household, qualifying surviving spouse. Again, if there is any time you or the taxpayer are confused on what filing status is going to give them the better option, always refer to your resources. Use the interactive tax assistance, ask the taxpayers questions to get through that so that you both can determine which one is going to give them the better impact. We always want to use the one that is going to be that's going to give them the most advantage as it relates to the amount of tax they pay, the credits and deductions that they receive. Choosing the correct filing status results in the lowest tax. And so we want to always ensure that we're picking the right one. If they are adamant about what their filing status is, I've been filing this filing status for years. I know that I'm single. I know that I'm head of household. Listen, you don't have to argue with these taxpayers unless you know that they don't qualify. If they're filing head of household, or attempting to file head of household and don't have a dependent, they don't qualify. And so they can argue from A to Z. When they finish, if you don't have a dependent, you don't qualify for head of household. And so sometimes we have to make them aware of what the rules and qualifications for these filing statuses are. We talked about injured spouse, which is the form 8379. Another type of relief that a spouse can have if one owes debt is innocent spouse. That relieves the spouse who does not have the debt from being responsible for that liability. If they advise that they want to file innocent spouse, you'll have to refer them to a paid preparer that is out of scope for the VITA TCE program. If they depend on your tax assistance program, community property tax laws for married filing separate taxpayers. Again, you want to always refer to, there is information on irs.gov as it relates to community property, common law, marriage, things like that. And so you want to always refer to your resources as well as your site coordinator if you have questions as it relates to community property tax laws, and if a taxpayer states that they are in a common law marriage. Those rules are complex and they differ from state to state. Again, Tennessee is not a state that recognizes common law marriage, but the law states that if it's recognized in one state, then it has to be recognized in another. And so we have to be mindful of where a taxpayer is coming from if they are stating they are in a common law marriage. And so again, you want to refer to your resources as well as your site or assistant site coordinator if it's something that you have questions about. Are there any questions or concerns as it relates to filing statuses? If not, we'll take a break. We'll be back at 8:35 and we'll end tonight looking at the practice lab, and we'll pick back up on tomorrow with the remaining of tax law.
Is Tennessee common law state, isn't it?
Tennessee is not a common law state.
Is it community?
Any other questions or concerns? All right, let's take a break and be back at 8:35. There we'll close out the night looking at the practice lab and what that entails. All right.
Quick question, can you go back to the married filing separate slide?
Mm-hmm. You have a question about married filing separate?
I just wanted to take the notes.
Okay. Now, again, these slides are available on your Lincoln Learn landing page so that you don't have to write all that information down.
So, okay, so these are available on the.
Yeah, so they're listed
landing
under,
page.
let me see if I can show you. So there, can you, hold on. So they're listed here on your Lincoln Learn landing page. They're listed under instructor tools, but they are available for, I think they should be available for anyone. Let's see. And if you click on, so if you go back to under quick links, if you click on the Lincoln Learn tax lessons, it'll also give you that information. And so it is here where it says click here to see the content of each course. That's the same information that we're covering.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, your publication 4491 will have this information for you as well. If you have access to the publication 4491, so that you won't have to go through all those slides. The publication 4491 is a training guide. And so it has all the information as well as it relates to the information that we're going to cover during this tax law. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes,
All right. Does it show the link and learn landing page?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So what I talked about was the practice lab. And again, that practice lab is available now. You don't have to wait until we get into the advanced certification portion of it in order for you to access the practice lab. So the practice lab is located below where you would normally sign in under quick links for the practice lab. If you have never created an account under the practice lab, hold on, it should have asked for a universal password. Let's see. So if you've never created an account on or never accessed the practice lab before, it's going to ask you for a universal password in order to access the practice lab. That universal password is train pro web. It's all one word in all caps. And I'm thinking he used to say it somewhere. Yeah, at the very bottom, it'll tell you what that generic password is in order to gain access to the lab. I think because I had already been in it, it's bypassing it for me. But if this is your first time going into the practice lab, it's going to ask for that generic password. Again, it's train pro web, all one word, all caps, in order to access that practice lab. Once you've done that, if you've previously set up an account, your username and password is the same.
Okay, okay.
Is there a question?
That was my question. You answered it, the username.
Okay. So if you've never accessed the practice lab before, then you will need to create an account. And so once you go into create an account, the password requirements for the practice lab is your password must be at least 15 characters, but no more than 25 characters. You want to also use an email address that you have access to, so that if you forget your password or your username and you need to reset it or change it, that is going to send you a link to your email. So ensure that you are using an email address that you have ready access to. It asks for the program type. You're going to use VITA. The site identification number or the SIDN is not required. And then it's going to ask for you to select a security question and enter that answer.
Look, Ms. Rucker, so what page do we go to create the account? Because it's just asking me to, oh, is that where I enter the password?
That's where you're going to enter that universal password, the train pro web.
Okay.
It's bypassing that for some reason for me, so I don't know. It's going automatically to the username and password. Once you've created an account, or if you already have an account and you sign in using your username and password, this is the landing page that you're going to come to. And so in order for you to access that practice lab, the only thing you need to do is to go to practice area. The practice lab is identical to the live software that you will be using as a volunteer preparer. This is what the software looks like. And so on my left-hand side, it shows links to the IRS website. There's a quick link for mailing addresses. Sometimes taxpayers will ask you, where do I mail my return? Where do I mail this? Where do I mail that? That link will take you there. It's also a quick link to the publications, instructions, and filling in forms on the irs.gov website. If you have any questions or concerns, or there's issues with the software, you can go into the VITA TCE blog. Sometimes they already have commonly asked questions there. There is a suggestion box. There in the interactive tax assistance is those decision trees that I was referring to as it relates to filing status, and there's some similar IRS decision trees if the taxpayers has questions, and so you can click there. But once we get into the advanced certification, there are some scenarios that require you to input a return. Let's see, I think 7. So if you're wanting to go ahead and go into the practice lab and practice those returns, you'll use the information out of the publication 6744.
I beg your pardon. How do we get to the login for all of this? I apologize.
For the practice lab?
Yes, ma'am.
It on your Lincoln Learn landing page. That's LincolnLearnTaxesCertification.com.
Gotcha.
And before you sign, you don't have to sign in order to access. You don't have to sign in here in order to access the practice lab. It's a different sign in for the practice lab versus your certification sign in.
Oh, okay. I was immediately.
And so if you go under quick link,
gotcha.
It'll take you to the practice lab.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or concerns as it relates to signing in or creating an account for the practice lab? So if you want to go into the practice lab and you want to try to get familiar with playing around or knowing where information goes in the practice lab, let's see. Under the advanced scenarios, let's see. Once you get to advanced scenario 7, it's going to advise you that using the tax software, which is the practice lab, is what you will need in order to go into that practice lab and play around with entering these returns. And so it gives you instructions, because when you look at the information, it gives you an interview to kind of show if the taxpayer had come into your site, completed a 13614C, this is the notes that came out of that 13614C and an intake person speaking with that taxpayer. So this is all the information you will need in order to go through and complete that return, as well as Social Security cards, income documents, all that is listed in your 6744. In your 6744, you'll notice that all Social Security numbers, dates, zip codes, things like that will have X's. You're going to replace those X's with any digits of your choice. So you'll have the first 5 digits for a social security number. The last 4 will be X's, and so you can enter whatever digits that you want. If you enter this information more than once, so you can get comfortable and get a feel of what this software is, then just change the last 4 digits. So for Matthew, if you use 416001234, the first time you input this information and you want to input it again, just so you'll have a feel of where everything goes, then you're just going to start with Matthew again, enter 41600, and this time use 4567 or something to that nature so that you can change the social security number. But anywhere you see X's, it's going to ask for you to make up any 4 digits of your choice, and let's see if I can turn this. Okay, so anywhere you see on the documents that's listed in your 6744, it'll say your city, your state, your zip. And so you can use whatever zip code you want, whatever city and state that you want, but be mindful if you're just making up a city and state, some states will have a state tax requirement, although you're not required to go through and enter a state tax. If you enter if you use a city or a state that has a state tax, then it may populate that for you. We know that Tennessee does not have a state tax requirement, and so it's just easier for you to use Tennessee unless you want to enter a state return. The scenarios are going to give you all the information you need in order to input that information in the practice lab. It gives you all the wage and income information, any type of documentation that is needed in order to make that return complete.
So you got here by going to start a new 2023 tax return?
In the practice lab?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you just kind of play with the numbers and all that.
Right, from the 6744. I use the information from the 6744.
Okay. Yeah.
And you go through and populate, it'll go through and populate a return for you.
Okay, so you have to, for this screen that you have up now, you have to get there from the 6744.
The social security number?
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to use the scenarios in your 6744.
Okay. That's just a regular document.
The 6744?
Yeah.
It's still a publication, but
Okay.
it's called a form. So if
Okay.
you're looking for it, if you don't have it, so you can go to irs.gov. I think it may be attached or linked to the emails that Hunter sent out originally.
Okay.
But if not, then you can go to irs.gov. All you have to do is search form 6744 and it'll pull up this book for you.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm. And so those scenarios will be under advanced. And so any scenario you see that says tax software is needed, you can enter that information in the practice lab.
And so it's
Any
gonna
other questions or concerns?
always start off where it says social security number.
In order for you to start a return.
Uh-huh.
And again, you're gonna okay. You're gonna always use the information out of your scenario. And so it's gonna have the social security, the cards there for you to be able to input that information. And so for Matthew, it says 41600. And so when you're going to the practice lab, you're just going to enter 41600 is already there. And then you're going to enter any last 4 digits that you want to use.
Okay.
And you also have to confirm it and then just start return. You don't have to pick anything here. I just normally start return and it'll populate.
With Matthew information with this scenario.
Right. I don't know if I used this. Let's see. And so it's going to take, once you enter that social security number and confirm it, then it's going to take you to where you start entering information. If you're not sure what the filing status is, you have your filing status wizard that'll help you pick. Sometimes the 6744 will tell you what the filings, so like for here, it tells you that they want to file married filing joint. And so you don't have to try to figure out what the filing status is. Most scenarios will tell you what their filing status is for their particular return. And so you don't have to wait until we get to the advanced certification portion of it. In order for you to go into this practice lab and enter those scenarios, you are more than welcome to do that. And then once we get to it, if you've already completed it, we'll go through as much as we need to. Now, you don't have to go into this until we all go into it if you choose to. I'm going to try my best to get through the tax law portion of this training so that we can go through the scenarios together. So I'll help as much as I can on the advanced certification as much as time will allow us to. All right. Any other questions or concerns about anything that we've covered on tonight?
I've got one quick comment. So that form or that publication with the test booklet in it, since the IRS has released that, they've made a few kind of notes or adjustments in a volunteer tax alert. The link I just posted in the chat should be an attachment that's got, it takes you to that publication, but it's already got those changes built into it.
Okay. Thank you,
So if
Ken.
y'all click that link on the chat, that should open that up for you, and that's the revised version of it. It wasn't anything substantial, but just a couple minor changes that they've made.
I know that there were some errors on the initial publication, and so that may have been what they corrected.
Did you do it?
Okay.
No.
Mhm.
You did.
Yeah, I did. So this is the one that shows changes to the 6744. And so that's going to be the one that you'll most likely need to use. So I would advise for you to use the one that shows changes to Form 6744, the one that was put into the chat. Thank you so much for doing that, so that you are aware of what those changes are. Any other questions or concerns?
Did you see? Yeah, I saw it blue.
All right.
So thank you.
If there are no other questions or concerns, we will pick up on tomorrow where we left off in the tax law portion of this training. We'll pick up at personal exemptions.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good
Okay,
one.
one question.
Go ahead.
So how will we access the recordings for when we want to go back and do quick reviews or whatever that we discussed during the training?
So once we finish all 4 sessions of this training, I'll process the recordings and download those and edit them or whatever I have to do and then send them out to y'all.
Okay, cool beans. Well, thank y'all. Y'all have a great night.
You too. Thank you all.